Hey guys, Telegram Sam here. If you don't already know, I have an Instagram. It's Telegram underscore Sam underscore vinyl. So if you're on Instagram, check me out on there. But today's video is just a recent vinyl pickups where I show you guys the records I've gotten and listened to these last 2 weeks. As always, let's start off with the 45s. This first one is the Gun Club Ruby Sessions. This has Fire of Love backed with Bad Indian. This was an RSD release from one of the RSDs from last year. It's just some previously unreleased versions of these two songs that they did for their debut album. I don't have anything from the Gun Club yet, so I just saw this and it looked really cool, and I never see their actual albums out in the wild that much, so picked it up. And plus I'm reading Alice Baggs' autobiography currently, and I think Rob Ritter, who plays bass on here, was also in the Baggs for a brief period in time, and I think Terry Graham was as well. So yeah, they're very integral into the whole LA punk scene, so excited to finally have something from them in the collection. Next up, a band I really love and just want to have everything by. This is Now That's the Bark Lords, backed with What's This Generation Coming To by Urge Overkill. This is an original 1991 US press. This is the 31st release in the first volume of the Sub Pop Singles Club. It even still has the little attachment that you could mail in to start the Singles Club. I mean, like Sonic Youth, Laughing Hyenas, Helmet, like all those great bands. And it was only $60. That's crazy. Oh, $60 overseas, Canadian, $50. You get a little bit of a discount. But yeah, I just love Urge Overkill. I've loved everything I've heard from them. Their earlier stuff was a bit more heavier. They kind of remind me a little bit of the Melvins, but their 90s stuff kind of went more into like the whole rock pop thing. But I just love everything they do. Even their last album I really enjoyed. And this 45 came on like a translucent neon yellow vinyl with the Sub Pop label. But yeah, don't know Urge Overkill, check them out. They're awesome. Cannot talk about them enough. Next, another hole I was missing in my punk collection. This is Paint It Black backed with Thin White Line by the Avengers. This originally came out in 1983, and this is a 2012 US press. Great LA. Actually, I think they might have been San Francisco, some California punk rock band. They weren't together for that long. I think they were only together for like 2 or 3 years before they broke up in the early 80s. They famously opened for the Sex Pistols at their infamous San Francisco show. I think Mazzy was at. But yeah, this was their first single, and Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols later on ended up doing some producing work for them and produced their only studio album that would be released after they broke up. But I just love the Avengers. Penelope Houston is a fucking badass front woman, and I think now she's like a folk singer, which is kind of a complete 180 turn. But yeah, I was dying to get something from them, and I was super stoked to find this. And this one just came on green vinyl. Alright, so those were all the 45s I got. Moving to the long plays. First up, a record everyone has been talking about. This is A Light for Attracting Attention by The Smile. This came out earlier last month, mid last month. But this is, I would describe it as electronic alternative rock. This was the debut album from this group, composed of Tom York and Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead and Tom Skinner from Sons of Kemet. Yeah, everyone loves this album. I love it too. It'll definitely be in my video at the end of the year for one of my favorite releases of this year. It's just killer. It's essentially a Radiohead album, but without Radiohead on the cover. The first thing it reminds me of is the band Goblin. If you are familiar with the band Goblin, they famously did a lot of the soundtracks for Dario Argento's horror movies, and they have this very, very distinct, heavy bass lines throughout a lot of their songs, and this reminded me, a lot of the songs on this album remind me a lot of Goblin songs, especially the second song, The Opposite. I love that song. It reminds me a lot of the opening Goblin track from the movie Deep Red, or I think they also call it like the Hatchet Murders or something like that, but just super, super heavy bass lines or guitar lines. It's kind of hard to tell which it might be. But then it has these sort of like airy little electronic notes running throughout that like kind of perfectly tonally balance the songs, and it's fantastic. If for some reason you haven't listened to this yet, I cannot recommend it enough. And now I'm thinking about it, didn't Tom York do the soundtrack for the remake of Suspiria that came out a couple years ago? I think he did. So he might have probably been listening to a lot of Goblin, and obviously that like influenced him in this. That's my thought that kind of just came to me. And I got the one that came on yellow vinyl. Next up, a classic album that for some reason I didn't have in my collection yet. Led Zeppelin 2 by Led Zeppelin. This originally came out in 1969, and this is a 2014 German press. If you don't know Led Zeppelin for some reason, great hard rock blues band. I would say this is probably their heaviest album. You could definitely hear, the burgeoning early sounds of like early hard rock, heavy metal that would kind of start to really percolate in the mid to late 70s. But obviously this was their second album. The only other Led Zeppelin albums I have on vinyl are Houses of the Holy and Led Zeppelin 3, but I pretty much have their entire discography on CD, but it's just now trying to have all of their discography on vinyl. But yeah, produced by Jimmy Page. This is up there as one of my favorite Led Zeppelin albums. I always kind of go back and forth between like Led Zeppelin 3 and Led Zeppelin 1 is my all-time favorites, but then you have Physical Graffiti, which is just a mammoth of an album. There's so much stuff on that album. It's a double album. There's so many genres on that, so that's like also a favorite. I just love Led Zeppelin. They're just so great, and it's been a while since I've listened to this album in its entirety. But this was a remaster that Jimmy Page did. So the first album is the album Led Zeppelin 2, and then there's a second disc that has some like outtakes, early demos, rough mixes of songs that are on this album, and I really enjoy both of them, and they sound fantastic. Even the demos sound excellent. So yeah, Led Zeppelin 2, an essential to have. And just came on heavy duty 180 gram black vinyl, OG Atlantic label. Next up, an RSD release from, not last RSD, but the one in April, I think. This is Kawaii by Childish Gambino. Originally came out in 2014 as an EP. I think it was a split EP. It was this and something else. And this is a 2022 US press. Great sort of hip-hop, pop, spoken word thing. An EP released after his second album. I think it's called The Internet Made Me Do It. But I just love anything by Childish Gambino, aka Donald Glover. I've loved everything he's done, whether it's acting, his stand-up, his just everything he does, writing. He's a fantastic writer. His music, obviously. And I really have to give him credit for getting me into hip-hop and rap music. I remember his first album came out, I think it's called Camp, and I just became obsessed with it, and that kind of skyrocketed me into, diving into hip-hop and rap music, both new and old. So thank you, Childish Gambino, for awakening and helping me discover that amazing genre that is very much underappreciated in the VC. This isn't my favorite thing he's ever released. I really kind of just got this because it has Sober on it. I just love that song. I think that's one of his greatest songs from his early era. But Awaken My Love, I talked about that album not that long ago. I just love that album. I think it's one of the greatest albums that have come out in the last 25 years. And yeah, I just want to have everything by Childish Gambino. I just love him so much. And this RSD release was like a mystery color variant. So you either got a yellow vinyl, a blue vinyl, or a split yellow and blue vinyl. I think the split ones were like the most rare ones. And I got the light blue one. Next up, we got Black Power by The Peace. This originally came out in 1975, and this is a 2016 US press. Great funk, soul, psych, rock music. This was the first and only album released from the Zambian band. I think they were only together for a couple years. They actually did record a second album. I think it's called Black is Beautiful. But unfortunately, it has been lost in time, and they do believe it's out there somewhere, but it's hopefully in good condition, hiding, just waiting to be found. Hopefully it's not damaged at all, but it'd be so cool to hear that album, because this is from all of the sort of 70s era Zambian rock, African rock, soul, funk I've heard. This is by far my favorite. You can definitely hear the influences of like the whole flower power 60s soul funk thing. You can hear Jefferson Airplane, James Brown, Jimi Hendrix on this, and yeah, this is just a killer album. If you're kind of hesitant about getting into African or Zambian rock music, I think this is a really great place to start. Yeah, killer if you don't know it. And this one just came on black vinyl with the Now Again label. Next up, another RSD release. This was kind of the only thing I was really interested that came out in the last RSD, but this is Keep On Truckin' by Surfboard. This originally came out last year, but this is the first time it's been released on vinyl. Great rock, punk, garage band. I've been following them now for a really long time. I've been following Danny Miller, the lead singer, on Instagram for a really long time, and I think I heard about her music in 2017, 2018, and I've just loved everything they've done ever since. I really love how a lot of bands now that are kind of holding the torch and keeping the flame alive for punk and rock music are fronted by women. You have Surfboard, Emil and the Sniffers, Starcrawler, Alice Wolf. They're just keeping the torch alive and kind of really showing all these old guys how to really rock. But yeah, this is a killer album. It has like elements of hardcore, elements of just straight up punk, elements of just straight up garage, and then you have some lighter pop punk stuff. Not like the pop punk that they now play on the radio, that just because it has a guitar in it they call pop punk, but real pop punk, how it's supposed to be done. And this was produced by the great Linda Perry, who is famously in Four Non Blondes, and she's done a lot of other great producing work. This is just a killer album. You can get these for super cheap. I think on Discogs you can get them for like 10 or 12 bucks now, but definitely worth a shot if you're into punk rock, garage, just killer rock music that gets you going. So check them out if you're not familiar with them. And this one just came on blue vinyl. I love the center labels. Definitely Maggie this morning. But I think these were limited to 1,000 copies, I think, for RSD. Next up, we got Vindicator by Arthur Lee. This originally came out in 1972, and this is a 2020 European press. I've described this as psych rock blues. This was Arthur Lee's debut solo album. If you aren't familiar with Arthur Lee, he was a part of the band Love. Very influential in the California psych rock scene, and I just love this album. This is a killer solo work from him. I believe he only released 2. He released this one and then another one I think in 1981. But yeah, the song "Everybody's Gotta Live," I love that song. It's such a great song. But you can definitely hear like the influences of like Jimi Hendrix on this album. He even has a picture of him and Jimi Hendrix in the gatefold here. But yeah, just a killer, just rockin' blues. Just Arthur Lee is just such a great guitar player, and he unfortunately doesn't have the same sort of iconic myth legend as Jimi Hendrix as like one of the greatest guitar player ever. But he definitely deserves that moniker and does not get talked about enough as just one of the greats in guitar playing. And this is a fantastic album, and if you aren't familiar with his solo work, definitely check it out. And this one just came on 108 gram black vinyl with the A&M Records tan label. Next up, a band I surprisingly did not have anything from in my collection before this. This is White Light, White Heat by the Velvet Underground. This originally came out in 1968, and this is a 2018 US press. This is definitely them getting more like experimental art rock, noise rocky. This was their second studio album, and the last album they did with John Cale. Yeah, I don't have any Velvet Underground. I just like never see their stuff out in the wild. I had to order this online. And I know a lot of people consider this their favorite Velvet Underground album. I don't know if I'd say that. I really personally love Loaded and their first album. This one's kind of a little bit out there. This is kind of like the Funhouse Velvet Underground record. But I really dig it. You can definitely hear how influential this album would come to be. And this album, or this version of this album, has a remaster of the album, and then there's a second disc that has sort of additional material, like alternate takes and instrumental versions of songs on here and other songs they did. But yeah, I'm just super glad to finally have something by the Velvet Underground in my collection. I have like solo Lou Reed stuff and Nico stuff, so I'm kind of working backwards here. And both records came on this blue vinyl, the Verve label. Next up, we got Grant's First Stand by Grant Green. This originally came out in 1961, and this is a 2019 European press. This I would describe as jazz, soul jazz. This was Grant's first album, and it includes Babyface Willette on organ and Ben Dixon on drums. This reminds me a lot of like early sort of proto Booker T and the MGs. I think Green Onions came out the year after this, or a year or two after this, but you can definitely hear the influence, especially with Babyface Willette's like organ playing and Grant Green's guitar. It's just very, very reminiscent of that early Stax soul instrumental sound. But this is such a great killer jazz record. I feel like this is very like a great sort of beginner record if you're kind of like into rock, soul music, but kind of want to get into jazz. I think this is a great place to start. Yeah, killer record. I don't have any Grant Green in my collection yet, so had to kickstart that. And this just came on 180 gram black vinyl with this Jazz Images label. Alright, so that's it for all the stuff I bought myself, and then I got a lovely package from a viewer of mine named Brad. I showed a 45 by the Records in a couple videos ago, and he was like, hey, I have some extras of their first two albums if you want one. And I was like, yeah, I would love to have them. And so I got the self-titled Records album. This came out in 1979 US press. Great rock, new wave, power pop. I believe in the UK it has a different cover, and it was called Shades in Bed. But yeah, just such a killer post-punk power pop record, partially produced by Mutt Lange. sounds amazing. And this one just came on black vinyl with the white and blue Virgin label. And then we got their second album, Crashes, original 1980 US press. Great power pop, rock, kind of like the last record. I would say this one isn't as good as the first one, but I still really enjoy it. And Brad was telling me that their third album and pretty much every album after that wasn't really that great. So I think I'll stick with these first two when it comes to the record's discography. So thank you so much, Brad, for these albums. And this one also came on black vinyl with the white and blue Virgin label. But yeah, that was all of the records I got and listened to these last 2 weeks. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.